And we are back. We are still at the Disruptive Diner, Surprisingly Open. It is March 18th, 2014. So we've been talking about open source. We've looked at it, what is it from a technology perspective and how does it work, and a lot of how what we see online and all of these places are really driven by open source. And then we took a dive with Jonathan Leek into kind of what this looks like when people start playing with this, and what we look at why people want to get engaged and why they want to contribute their time. I was going to give a shout out. There's a great book that talks about that that's called Cognitive Surplus by a guy named Clay Shirky, a really bright guy. But I want to go even further. So we talked about this being surprisingly open, and Dave Leipholtz has been gracious enough to join us today. And Dave, as you can see, is with Better Together. And Better Together is actually a really interesting thing that we're coming from St. Louis, and depending on where you're at in the world watching this, you may or may not have some of the problems here, but we have actually a very, what we call a balkanized political structure here. So lots of municipalities, some actual separation between places that goes back to some Civil War decisions and some other things going on. And it's maybe not the most efficient way for us to work as a region anymore. And so Dave is going to walk us through how we can take some of this openness that we're talking about as a way to build consensus and actually bring people together, to actually start with the idea that openness will ultimately get us to the best solution. So Dave is going to walk us through that, and he'll have plenty of some time for questions afterwards. Anything else? Are you ready to go? Ready to go. He's going to do 20 slides, 20 seconds each. So once again, we want to cut him some slack. But he's going to do great, and when you're ready, hit the space bar.
All right, thanks a lot, and thanks for having me, but I will get right to it so we can get to more time for questions. So I'm Dave Leipholtz, community-based, or Director for Community-Based Studies for Better Together, and I'll get to what more of that means a little bit later on. We're an organization that was essentially created because there's a growing public interest in how we govern ourselves here in St. Louis. We have a very fragmented government model compared to most cities, and there's no comprehensive studies or data available because of that fragmentation. And so we wanted to really be a catalyst for that, and as you see our mission there, we want to be grassroots about it too, because it's not just about providing the information for us, but also the discussion that occurs and that collaboration that comes from it. And we'll get into that into a little bit more detail. But we really see ourselves as being a driver behind a transparent discussion and really a resource for that information. As you can see, we're a catalyst for informed dialogue, and that really has its roots in the fact that this conversation has been going on for well over a century, but there hasn't been the information and database available for people to change other people's minds. You have to have information to have a dialogue that's going to convince people one way or another. And we believe that we're better together if we do that, along with the information, along with each other. If we have that discussion, that's going to be something that's going to drive our region, and not simply an argument based on emotions and lacking facts. So in talking about our region, the big numbers are worth a look. We have 115 governments throughout St. Louis City and St. Louis County, and that just includes municipalities, fire districts, St. Louis City and St. Louis County. We spend over $2 billion annually on municipal services. $1.6 billion comes from taxes. Those are worth a look. And the way we're going to do that is through a community-based study. And this is a different way of not only providing information, but recognizing that data is just one component, but the collaboration around it is really the key that drives a successful study. And these are the various different content experts we're going to go to. But most importantly, what's different about our study compared to an outside consultant coming in is our definition of a stakeholder. We believe that everybody in our community, the city and the county, should be a stakeholder, viewed as such, treated as such, and their input becomes part of our process just as much as it would be for the mayor, the county executive, civic leaders. And the purpose behind this study is that data does only tell part of the story. The conversation around the data is also going to give us a different look into what we're doing as a region. It's also going to create that ownership and allow people to feel like they're part of digesting that data, looking at our region, and providing some analysis. The 6 study topics that we've chosen are traditional municipal services. We started with public finance, which we've released, and I'll show you a little bit of. But that was just compiling from all those different governments the different documents that show the debt and revenue, and making things that are attainable, accessible, and available, and that's the biggest part of our process. And then we approach each of these areas with 4 key questions, and those are the key questions we ask community leaders, neighborhood leaders, people who want to have a one-on-one discussion at their house and have coffee. And they're all designed to really get at what are we doing and have an informed discussion around what we're doing, what we could do to improve, and really what are best practices, what do people like, what do they not like. And at the end of each study, we produce a report, and that report is in the form of not just our presentation of the findings and the aggregate data, but every single source document we look at, any polling we see. Any information we use to produce this is available on our website, which is www.bettertogetherstl.com. And the reason we want to do that is we don't want to just have the information up there. We don't want, here, take it, this is ours. We want the discussion around it, but we also want people to fact check us. It's important to us that this information, if it is inaccurate in parts, is improved. And we think that by having 1.3 million eyes on that as opposed to just a couple is a way to do that. And this is an example of how we presented our data. We have the source material library, which you can access everything that we've looked at and gotten information from. Any data we produce in a report, we footnote to a specific document and a specific page number. And as you can see, you can also search by the municipality, the document name. You can scroll through there and look at what different municipalities are doing, what are best practices, who's doing something particularly well. Why aren't we all doing that as a region? And that's a way we want people to improve this process and improve not just the data, but how we function. We even have basic search terms, word clouds, anything we can do to make it digestible for people, because simply providing the massive amount of data to someone isn't making it available or accessible. And so that's really the thing that we want to strive to do, is to make that accessible to someone who works a job and doesn't have the ability to, as a full-time job, track all of this down. A component that goes along with the data is outreach. We want to do one-on-one meetings, coffee meetings, sponsored discussions. Anywhere and everywhere we can have someone's ear and attention, that's where we want to be, because this data for so long has been difficult to obtain. In terms of accessibility. You could always go get it, you could track it down, it would take hours to really compile all of it. But the biggest thing is we want them to have access to it with ease. And in that transition from material that's just attainable or obtainable to accessible, you have to convince people of that. You have to kind of be a catalyst for that discussion, instigate the dialogue, and these are all the ways that we've done that through social media and driving all the traffic that we can to let people provide feedback, but also guide the discussion themselves. What do they see as the future of a region? What do they want? How can we get there together? And my time is up, but that's essentially how we got the name Better Together. We believe the data, the conversations together, and the improvements we can put into it are going to be what guides us.
Great. Thank you very much. So, great presentation. What I like that you talked about is, we took some of the stuff that Jonathan was talking about that are, people that are that do this stuff and they're really, very involved in this, and taking that to the broader community, because not everybody knows how to dive into this. Nobody has the time. Not everybody has the time. Not even everybody knows how to find this. So can you give an example that maybe from this first set of data on public finance, and I know you said that that's basically just aggregating what's already out there,
right,
and finding some common ground with it, but can you talk a little bit about the power that openness is having on the discussion?
Well, I think that it allows people to see where money's going, how it's being spent, how our infrastructure is developed and financed. So it really just gives them the information of how things function, rather than a lot of times you just see the outcome. You see a new road go up. You don't see necessarily the bond issue that went into that. And I really think that just information in general allows us to just make decisions better down the road based on not just end results, but the processes. And could those processes be done more efficiently? Could we have saved money and done them differently? Can we collaborate more, not just on the study, but as governments and how we act as a region?
So this is more than just, hey, we're going to put this up on, we're going to start a fork on GitHub and we're going to start collecting data. This is
right.
A big effort. So what was the pain in the community, and what brought people together to say, we ought to do a sustained push on this, we ought to be reaching out, being inclusive about that, we ought to gather the resources to make a sustained push? Can you talk about, talk about that a little bit so that other communities might get a sense of how they might start down this path?
Well, and I think it's important, we're not advocating for a specific solution to any of the problems. So overwhelmingly, I just think that there is a feeling of we could do some things better, whether it's collaborating on certain services, combining certain services, but we have not really had this region-wide analysis or discussion in a very, very long time. And there was talk of it going on before those projects started, but it was almost taking place on a treadmill, and that it just wasn't really going anywhere because you can't convince people without information. And so people kind of held to their beliefs on what would happen based on certain scenarios, and they were largely emotional, largely based on some information, but not all of the information. And so now it's kind of us just saying, here it is, let's have that open, honest discussion about it.
So talk a little bit about, so if you start looking at how do you build some early stakeholders that are like, hey, we want to commit to this, we want to, we're going to take the advocacy part of it out of it, and we're just going to start having this discussion. Is that something that emerges across political lines? I mean, you talked about, I think there's some really interesting research that what we think of as political parties is actually more emotional state, how you approach thinking more than it is a philosophy. So can you talk a little bit about what it takes to get those people talking to each other?
I think it's really a matter of if we can do things more efficiently, whether you're a Democrat, an independent, a Republican, a Libertarian, nobody wants to pay more than they have to. So if we can do it more efficiently, I think people are always on board with that. Or if there's some additional things we can do to grow our region, that doesn't really know a party. I think also our board, our staff, the people we communicate with, the people we meet with, cross those boundaries. And so I think just doing that outreach and making them part of the discussion and feel ownership of this process is a big part of that.
That's an interesting segue. There's on our website, you can find an archive talk from last year with one of the people from the city of Chicago. And Chicago has done a huge part where, because of consent decrees and all kinds of other things that have happened, they just suddenly started seeing the data that they already collect, whether because they were mandated to or because the systems made them have to collect it or everything. And they started thinking about that as an asset. What can we actually turn back over to other people to build on? So, people building apps to, give me 7 minutes notice before my bus gets to my office door, so I have a chance to get to it, and that I don't have to sit around in the rain waiting in a bus shelter that doesn't have a roof or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that we live, especially now, in a time where people are not confused, or, they don't say too much information, I can't handle that. People want more. They want to know the how and the why, and not just what's happening. And so I think that anytime you can do that, it's well received across Republican, Democrat, any parties, political leanings, regionally.
Yeah. Any other questions from here in the audience or comments? No? Well, so thank you very much, Dave, for being here today. We're just about out of time. We got some good questions that indicate that some other communities are thinking about this. And it's just important that, this information, this data is really how we deliver services now. And if we don't treat it like an asset that we can actually build on, then ultimately we're going to pay the price. So this has been the Disruptive Diner, Surprisingly Open. Next month on Tax Day, April 15th, 2015, we're going to be talking local investment, local wealth. So we're going to be talking about why investment models tend to favor hedge fund managers and other people like that in those products, and how we can get that capital that people are already investing in their pension fund and in all kinds of other places to flow back into communities to rebuild those communities, and to use for local entrepreneurship, because startups and small business are really the engine of the economy. So that's going to be a great opportunity. Everybody did a phenomenal job today. Scott and Jonathan and Dave, and I really want to give you guys one more round of applause and thanks. Everybody's talk will be on the SlideShare. The slides will be up on SlideShare at the end of the day. Their YouTube clips will be up by the end of the week so that you can see this. Please feel free to share these and forward them to other people if you'd like to become a member, or even host your own events. We produce a discussion guide, and if you want to have the Disruptor's Guide to how to use these ideas to build your own events, let us know. Thanks very much, and have a great day.